I wanted to open up a discussion about the power of words. And maybe you believe words don't have power, maybe you believe that they're powerful, limiting, whatever. This is to kind of dive deep into that and maybe go a little bit poetic, from your favorite words to etymologies. This is a space to share about the power of words.
Saying that words are violence is not a serious position. Words are not violence. Violence is violence. If you disagree, then go tell mean words to somebody and have them punch you in the face and see if those two things are equivalent. The problem with saying that words are violence is that means that anything you say then can be interpreted as violence. Literally anything, and therefore I can control anything you say. So no, words are not violence, and anyone who makes that statement cannot be taken seriously.
Words are neither good nor bad, nor violent nor non-violent. They are tools that we use to communicate, and tools that we use to manipulate, and tools that we use. Words can very much be violent or used for violence, and I've posted a study here on emotional abuse, which is something that I grew up with, and then, unfortunately, because of that, put myself in a position to receive that again later on in life. I have also been physically harmed. My brother knocked the wind out of me on 2 separate occasions. I have broken my ankle, I have broken my wrist, I've scraped up my face in a skateboarding accident, and those have all healed practically completely. The things that haven't been completely healed, and is a lifelong healing journey for as much as I know, is from the emotional and psychological abuse. And the most challenging thing of words being used in a violent manner, harmful, hurtful words, is that nobody can see those wounds. So that adds on another layer of an issue, because no doctors can heal that. The person who is with the wounds is left to figure it out, for the most part. But with that said, I have certainly been a person who has used words to harm people. When I was 16, I brought one of my bosses to tears. Not one of my good moments. But words do have a very real power, and I think this really does beg exploring.
I love the scripture. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Something powerful about that, realizing the power of words. And I'm not sure if I'm quoting it correctly or paraphrasing it, I don't know. But words are powerful. And as a religious person, I know the power of words. And I try to speak positive words over my life, over people. The difficulty is when some words that are general words, that are not specifically targeted at a specific person, these are words that have been in our vocabulary for a long time, suddenly become sensitive words. Then it changes everything. Because how do we communicate? It really stifles communication. I have certainly been a person that is insecure about certain things, or certain words are triggered to me that are general words because of my background, because of life experiences. But I then have to take responsibility and try to communicate to those people who are talking to me, how those words make me feel in a certain context. And it's my responsibility to make them understand and talk to them in a way that will make them approach me better going forward. So there's tact, respect, consideration that has to go into that, but you have to also be the one that communicates it as a person who is hurt by those words in a way that allows the people to be able to correct their behavior and not feel like they've been demonized for speaking the words.
Oh, I totally agree with this. This one is absolute gold. Actually, a lot of your chits are absolute gold. And this makes so much sense, because that is, case in point of healing, is so that these words no longer have power over you in a negative way, that you are greater than words. And so responsibility is huge, but responsibility can also be very confusing in itself, because, hearkening at the beginning of this conversation, when it comes to emotional abuse, that's all a person can do, is just take these things on top of them. And it's a confused state of understanding what responsibility really is. It's because you're so within that state of confusion of responsibility, you've become so powerless that you just take anything onto you and give up. And certainly, within my healing journey, figuring out what responsibility really is has been huge. And knowing that, I have the ability to choose now at this time has opened up the ability for me to, openly share and speak about this in a positive way. And I'm not going to lie, I did get a little bit triggered, but to not externalize or cause harm because of that trigger, it's been a huge learning journey, because hurt people. And I think that's case in point. And when there is the fear mechanism, the trauma behind certain words, we are responsible. That means understanding that we have choices within the scope of what we say yes to and what we say no to. It is a superpower. And just to clarify on getting triggered just with recent events in my personal life and just the memories that are coming up and not from, people in general. And maybe that's the distinction that is made from Naval's chit, is that, these are very internalized processes. Granted, there is a difference from when you are a child and your default settings are to absorb everything. And then when you're an adult, you learn to discern or get to a point to discern what gets to be taken in and what doesn't.
Brittany, being an adult is really a process. Untangling our minds, healing is a long process. And the thing that really has helped me up to where I am now has not really been trying to achieve perfection. It has really been trying to achieve authenticity and to put myself in spaces where my flawed nature can be improved, in a place where I'm being challenged to grow, in a place where I'm being challenged to think better, to speak better, to do better, to aspire for better, while at the same time being accepted in my flawed nature. And so when words are constructed in a way that is fostered, it becomes positive. But when they're weaponized, used to, put fences around people, and they become dangerous. So yeah, it's a big thing to untangle. But thank you for opening this room, and I hope more people jump in.
From the earlier conversation, I don't believe words are violence. I believe violence is violence. And just to correct myself on this, I've looked up the legal definitions and the dictionary definitions, and violence itself assumes a component of physical force. So yes, words can be harmful, helpful. They can build people up. They can destroy people for a lifetime. But I think we do need to separate those concepts, even given the understanding of the power of words. I've noticed the power of words some years ago when I started taking a step back and watching myself speak, using words like, if it wouldn't be too much trouble, please, not please in the polite sense, but please in the sense of subjugation. When I started removing the conditional from my sentences, I started feeling powerful, a lot more powerful. When I started flipping my sentences so that they were nearly always positive, or using a word like yet, I don't know something, or I don't know something yet, it just accelerated my progression and my feeling of expertise in so many areas. The more positivity and definition I brought into every sentence I wrote, everything I said, it became a habit. It became more of a defining factor, and I noticed it changed me.
Awesome. And I love your clarification on this as well. And then my question is, where do people go that have been harmed from these words? Because there is actually a physical component, or theoretically a physical component, where it does cause brain repatterning. It does cause, I guess, so to speak, brain damage. And what is the way that these things can be established in, say, a person being made whole again in a legal sense of things?
I'm coming back to this today because I spent some time thinking about it, and I did some research and digging. I think violence and words really do need to be separated. The dictionary definition of violence is an act of physical force that causes or is intended to cause harm. The legal definition and criminal definition of violence also includes the elements or attempted use or threatened use of physical force against a person or property. And I know many of us in several conversations have talked about being kind, respecting people, using words properly. Words definitely can escalate into an action which includes violence, and words can be abusive, and words can affect recipients even more than physical violence. All of those I agree, but I do think that it's worthwhile making the distinction between words and violence and handling them separately in the conversations. Although I do think words are being used to force agreement and self-censorship, I still don't think that elevates to the level of violence. So I don't know if that's worth discussing in this conversation, or if that would need to be a separate conversation.
Yeah, it's very tricky because some of it is threats of violence. And, especially when something is shouted, most of the time it can be threats, if not, direct harmful words, berating someone, putting them down, and that sort of thing.
This is really an interesting space for me because actually I've witnessed these types of things happening in high school level. And there's real reputational damage in some situations, students making accusations or boyfriend, girlfriend. There's been a lot of situations where it's been verbal only. And so we do have libel laws. Those are spaces where we can legally prove words cause damage and we have remedy for them. But I don't think we yet have that sophistication in hate language or in harassment language or stalker language even. The codes are catching up, but I don't think they're there yet.
Yeah, and it is really tricky because if things go too far in one direction, then it is a punishment on free speech, and then we have that issue to deal with. But on the other hand, there are the issues that are not dealt with, like what is a good term to establish the harm that words can cause and have better dealings with it overall, because I think part of it, and this extends also into traumatic brain injuries, where there is no help or protocol for people with traumatic brain injuries. And this even goes for people with long COVID that are just lost. And I'm, thankful to be working for an organization that is addressing this issue. But it really does go down this whole rabbit hole on, what is the solution when there is this problem? I mean, one of the things of emotional and psychological abuse is making a person completely feel nuts, and sometimes it tips them over into being nuts and suicidal. I remember one point I was being so heavily berated, and I was in a car on the highway, and I just wanted to take my chances with the road and just jump out of the car. All that aside, one of the greatest forms of self-care is speaking to yourself kindly. And with my experience with the process of healing, like reorienting any negative speech that I have against myself, I don't really have just an inner chatter voice like Michael Singer in his book, but I can definitely get depressed and very negative on myself, especially when it comes to, situations of failure, which I've met many, many times. But being able to reorient that and have the self-love capability to counteract the negative self-speak.
We say that words are power, which means they either carry a positively charged power or a negatively charged power. We see words can be empowering or disempowering, and it's very important the words we speak with others and with ourselves, because that really impacts our aura, our consciousness, our spiritual connection with the divine. So yes, words are very potent. I agree. I've seen my patients come with wounds and traumas that they are carrying from a lot of years because someone said them so. It's like someone said them, you are dark, you're short, you are not enough, and that has stayed with them, and that has hampered them, their ability to heal, and they are deeply hurt. So yes, those that no doctor can cure.
So one of the things that came up for me as I was considering creating this space was how words could limit forces, how words or a name to something can all of a sudden create a limiter on it. That is an interesting power. Like, to put a name to God would all of a sudden limit God and make God less than what it is. And in further consideration on the power of words, how words are connected to our breath or life force, or something that we utilize to get ourselves into deeper states of being, meditation, hypnosis, NLP. It is very fascinating how there is so much power behind words. And then looking at scriptures, the Torah or Old Testament in the Bible, how God spoke. And I think that is more of a reverence to how words can be powerful.
I love the scripture. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Something powerful about that, realizing the power of words. And I'm not sure if I'm quoting it correctly or paraphrasing it, I don't know. But words are powerful. And as a religious person, I know the power of words, and I try to speak positive words over my life, over people. The difficulty is when some words that are general words, that are not specifically targeted at a specific person, these are words that have been in our vocabulary for a long time, suddenly become sensitive words. Then it changes everything, because how do we communicate? It really stifles communication.
Or they can also be liberating. A favorite quote of mine is, boredom is the absence of an interesting thought. And you can connect thoughts to an accumulation of words or concepts. So the ability to play with the concepts in your head, that takes you out of boredom immediately. So essentially, if you're bored, you just play around with your vocabulary and you're entertained forever.
I read another explanation about boredom from the book Reframe Your Brain by Scott Adams. He says, if you are bored with something, that means you're not embarrassing yourself enough. If you are doing things you don't know in front of witness, then you will lose your boredom.
That's a cool way to define boredom. I mean, think about it. All we really want to do is just encounter uncharted territory, whether it's spiritual, physical, or mental. I think anytime we encounter something new or novel, whether it's outside of ourselves or inside, the whole universe opens up again. What are your thoughts about this?
Uncharted territory reminds me that actually everyone is a scientist. We just explore anything. We are truly interested in the new things to open new worlds and new possibilities.
I don't know if this has been covered here or not, but I read this quote from Destin Gerek where emotion comes from Greek or Roman, I should look it up. It basically means energy in motion. And I love that. Emotion means energy in motion. And this is your body's energy moving through you, creating these emotional waves.
I love this, and I'm really appreciating this conversation on boredom as well. And one of the offshoots of boredom is creativity, and this really comes into what you're saying of, opening up the world again, and that is, in part, science being the creative process of creating a theory and then seeing if it's true or not. And yeah, it's always fascinating because boredom is also the inability to be still with oneself and just be present in a space.
Man, this is such a great quote. The reason is it's so true. I used to work in the restaurant industry, and every time you're moving, you have more energy. So the more you do physically, the more energy you have. But then I notice when I'm working at a desk, man, it just feels like stagnating most of the time. So it's good to take breaks and move around a little bit.
Awesome. And I love your clarification on this as well. And then my question is, where do people go that have been harmed from these words? Because there is actually a physical component, or theoretically a physical component, where it does cause brain repatterning. It does cause, I guess, so to speak, brain damage. And what is the way that these things can be established in, say, a person being made whole again in a legal sense of things? Yes, this is so true. And I love that. It really is energy in motion. And then this connects with manifestation concepts of having to have emotion connected with what you want to manifest so that the energy moves in your favor. And another word that's like emotion broken down into energy and motion is intimacy, which in the coaching industry, we break that down to into me, you see.
This is very resonating with me because sometimes when I do meditation, I feel like we actually don't require the amount of oxygen that we inhale to survive. Meaning that when I sit in meditation and when I go into deep meditation, I feel like you just actually require a little amount of air that you inhale to actually live. You don't mindlessly breathe in and breathe out. And same with the words. When I'm in deep meditation, I feel like there is nothing much to say. There is nothing else to say. In my life, I've come across extremely few individuals who had impact of words. Words are powerful. Absolutely, but they're only powerful when the right people say it. People who are mentally, spiritually, in all forms, shapes, aligned with the nature, when they say something, that is extremely powerful because you will instantly resonate with it, you will instantly reflect, you will instantly get moved by those words. I have seen very few individuals in my life who can actually do that. The rest of them are just mindlessly breathing, mindlessly. When I say mindless, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're having no mind, because that is another conversation altogether. They're not even at that stage. They're just pre-programmed, just like, mosquitoes living, they're living as well. But I've seen very few individuals who actually are in sync with nature. When they say or utter something, you instantly resonate with that.
So I really wanted to highlight this because it's very interesting with going into more of the esoteric avenues, that spells, incantations, blessings, how words are used to manifest things. And, this goes into the power of manifestation, I am statements, affirmations, all of that are kind of incantations or spells. Even spells can be very poetic. Having rhyming pentameter to them is considered to be important. And, this also brings up grimoires, which are usually the spells written down. So it even takes this to like another level on the metaphysical plane.
Words are extremely powerful. In fact, if you look at all the big religions, you'll see them talk about words. In the Bible, death and life are in the power of the tongue. In the Quran, and speak to people good words. In the Bhagavad Gita, austerity of speech consists in speaking truthfully and beneficially. In the Buddhist sutras, speak not harshly to anyone. And in the Torah, reckless words are like the thrust of a sword, but the words of the wise bring healing. The other research and studies that I find interesting around this are on bilingual individuals. So a bilingual individual will experience less emotions with one language than another. One of the other things that I noticed for myself is whenever I get emotionally close to someone, my accent changes, and the closer I am to someone, I start to kind of naturally gravitate towards using my native tongue as opposed to English. So I find that really, really interesting.
Energy goes throughout the body all the time, 24/7. So if you are listening to someone's words, you're listening to their energy. And if it resonates with you and it gets stuck within you, then there's that instantly right there. Quantum physics proves that brain repatterning does happen, and you pick up things on a subconscious level, and that is constantly changing you. That's why no one is ever stagnant, because every single day that you live, you change. You're not the same person before. For the past 11 to 12 months, I've actually been answering this question, because I used to think that there was not a modality or solution. I thought I hit a certain point where, okay, you have the EMDR, you have meditation, you have cold exposure, you have all these things that can change your brain. You have deep journaling and certain types of specific patterns of whether that's EFT or CBT or a few Japanese techniques. But then I started delving into a lot more ancient modalities, and not only ancient modalities, but energy modalities mixed, using a lot of things we've learned in the modern day world, but using all the concepts and ideologies that are proved with quantum physics from the ancient realm. This is why when people tell you need to constantly be working hard, you need to constantly do this, they're actually preventing you from using one of the strongest parts of you, which is the creativity. Because a lot of just sitting down and relaxing allows your intuition to come in, allows your subconscious to be wide open and take in all the knowledge that you've been holding back as you've been constantly been doing, and now you can start to receive. I used to do the same exact thing, and every single time I was in class for karate, for the years that I did it, I continuously, there was music sometimes playing in the background, and we would do like push-ups or certain exercises exactly to the beat. And when I used to go to the gym, I also do that. I mean, now I more work at home, and I very, very like specifically only curate like specific high vibration songs, because we're talking about the power of words here. So what is the impact that lyrics have on the mind, the body, and the spirit? Most people don't realize, but they resonate with lyrics because on a subconscious level, I love this topic so much, I could probably go into it forever. But when you resonate with lyrics, it's because on a subconscious level, you agree with what the person is saying. You agree with that. And while that could be a good thing, it could be talking about something amazing, there's also a negative aspect to it. Where if you're constantly putting these words into the mind and the body, you're changing and you're repatterning your energy. And you're putting in a certain, maybe if it's depressing type of music or just music with negative energy in it, you're constantly putting that into the systems that you work with on a daily basis. And if you start to identify with it, it can become even more dangerous. This is why a lot of people identify so strongly with music, not because it's only just an amazing thing, but if they feel a certain way, those words that are, coming out of that song, they can say, oh, I love this artist, or I love this song so much. And it's because they resonate so strongly with it on an emotional and energetic level. This is why the amount of songs I listen to are extremely numbered, where I only probably listen to just a couple of songs on repeat. And if they're really, really positive vibration songs, that's the only thing I play. I don't play anything that's like has negative hertz to it or has lyrics that I know if that goes into my subconscious, that's not serving my purpose, or that's going to misalign me rather than align me. Less is more.
Lyric is a psyop vector. So while the melody loops, the words also loop, and that influences people's mind. I tend to go out in public where they have songs, and I just plug in my earplugs because it's almost always bad. There are also songs where the lyrics are just about wallow and self-pity, and some people resonate with that. It says a lot.
A song is essentially a mantra. It's lyrics that you repeat over and over to yourself, and you internalize them, and they eventually become your reality. They're very, very dangerous. And this is why you need to be careful about who you listen to, which is why I only listen to a few artists, and why I love Akira the Don, where he takes Jordan Peterson or others and kind of turns their speeches into songs. I love that kind of music.
So there is also a question on this, on how words change or deviate from their origins. Take the word nice, which used to mean stupid, and apply it to today's standards. So this is kind of another route of discussion, is two things. First off, how words and change within our society. And secondly, the energetic undercurrent of words. And does that energetic undercurrent of the original definition, origin, etymology still factor into words even after they have changed meanings? So on this line, bringing up nice again, the whole idea of nice guys finish last, well, yeah, that can be attributed to potentially the original idea of the word nice. And then it comes to when I was growing up, we'd say something like badass. And those two words have completely different meanings in that context, but their original meanings still exist as well. I mean, even the word ass just means donkey, and then it meant butt. So it's just fascinating and interesting how words do mature, shift, and encompass different meanings overall.
This reminds me of a very interesting thing which Mike Tyson has said. If I can get you angry by using my words and gathering them into a sentence, then I own you. Which means basically that I can manipulate the way that you feel using my words. So if my words are triggering you, meaning that I own you mentally and you're a slave.
This is an interesting topic because if you're a person who gets manipulated by words, it means that you're operating in a short-term to infinity spectrum, which would just be your imagination. A lot of times when people do manipulate you by words, they manipulate your identity through your imagination or through their perspective on your identity. This means that they don't take into account your actions in the long run, meaning they haven't seen your whole past, or maybe they diminish everything you've worked in the past just by utilizing a different concept. So this essentially just takes away the essence of skin in the game, meaning the more your actions correlate with your words or thinking, the more of an integrated person you are. And the more integrity you have, the less likely it is that you're to be manipulated by someone else's words.
In reference to what you were just saying, Brittany, I grew up in a pretty conservative religious household, and a big part of what the church that I belonged to taught was agency, and something that they began teaching when I was in my late teens was you give others your agency when you allow them to offend you with their speech. So yeah, I don't know if I totally believe that, but there are a lot of circumstances where if you can maintain a philosophically stoic perspective, then when they criticize you, they're not criticizing you, they're criticizing the idea of you. And it's up to you to decide whether or not you take offense to that. That's obviously extremely difficult, and it takes a lot of practice to separate.
Yes, abuse is all about control for the most part. And when it comes to emotional, psychological, verbal abuse, it really takes rewiring of the brain to undo the programming that's been done. This does remind me of an experience of something that happened on TikTok where I was taking a poll of a specific group within the paradigm of TikTok and ended up unintentionally pissing people off. I used the ultra offensive word of cis hetero, and I was specifically addressing people that would consider themselves that, who are more part of the LGBTQ market, because I wanted to understand certain dynamics of their experiences with gender roles. And lo and behold, I had so many people getting so upset because they thought I was calling them that. And I'm like, do you associate with it? And they would go, no. And then I would go, this is not for you. And then they would either go, oh, or they would just not say the whole thing. But it's very fascinating because this isn't something that they've been directly traumatized by. This is something that they've been manipulated into having some sort of experience around it, even though it has never been used or weaponized against them, and there is no nefarious intent really behind it. So that was a very fascinating experience, not only on the power of words, but on how there is manipulations that are happening within our society quite frequently from different entities. I would guess that comes more from sensationalized media publications for the most part.
Violence is just a word. We add significance to all these words, and a majority of us speak in the English language, so the way that we express things is not the same as other languages. Say, oh, that is violent, this is violent, is one way of expressing an emotion. But I agree, words are extremely powerful. Nicholas, I 1000% agree. And I would even go on to say, the less that you feel the desire and the less that you subconsciously manipulate other people, that simply means that you are less manipulative of yourself, and you're lying less to yourself. When you deceive others less, you're deceiving yourself less. Everything is a mirror. So whether that's using words in the way that you express your thoughts and emotions to other people, that reflects back on how you express your own emotions and decode them and understand them for yourself. everyone has the capacity to be manipulated by words on a subconscious level, whether they defend themselves or whether they put themselves in environments or whether they have a level of awareness is different. But when you hear a word, your immediate reaction is a big indicator of your current identity with the word, your current feelings, emotions, past baggage, and subconscious beliefs towards a certain word. Like if you were a person who spent a lot of time in abusive environments, then certain negative words will, not in the sense I say manipulate in a bad way, but remind you and put you back in a state where you start identifying and acting as if you were in that past environment. This is why there is so many good parts to the power of words, but a lot of people use them in a dangerous way and in a way that hurts themselves and hurts other people.
That is very well stated. And yes, it's a trauma response when words that could otherwise be benign end up triggering someone. And I wanted to kind of elaborate on manipulate as one of those words, because to really get out of those situations, manipulation needs to happen. And this is with, words like I am statements, words of affirmations, those sort of things, or fake it till you make it is another way of using words to self-manipulate yourself into a better way of being.
One of the interesting things about words is that the power is defined by the receiver. Words on their own will mean different things to different people, and it's all about how we react to the words as to whether or not they have power or not. So that means that when you write something down or when you give a speech or you talk to someone, you don't actually really know how much power is behind the words, because it is dependent on how it lands with the receiver, which creates this really interesting dynamic, because you can talk about people being very powerful with the words and words having power, but it's not something that you can set out to necessarily achieve. You can't set out to achieve a lot of power in your words, because really you have no idea how people are going to respond to it. And it's only when they respond to it that the power is determined. Or rather, you can, just to qualify that, of course, you can set out to try and achieve an impact with your words, but it's not like launching a rocket or throwing a punch that is measurable, and you know the effects that the force is going to have from that action before you even throw the punch or whatever. You can calculate it, through physics. You can't do the same with words.
But also, as I've been an actor, the whole point of acting is to utilize words to elicit a response. And there is a way of conveying that. Of course, as you mentioned, nonverbal cues, but there is a way for that intention of the utilization of the words to be conveyed to people for a specific reaction. And even if the reaction does not occur or does not occur to the extent, there is still something that acknowledges the words, or if it's completely ignored, then that's a completely different situation and scenario. Also, on the subject of part of the ability in the person utilizing the words to elicit responses are some best practices that I learned from doing game testing, because we had to give feedback to the devs, developers of the games, and there were words that we had to avoid. And these words are always, never, should, you, and I'm forgetting the other one, but these are words that do certainly elicit very personal responses. And that is why they are to be avoided. And you can look these up. And also within best practices of communication and utilizing communication skills, those words will be on that list of words to not utilize in communication, because they do tend to very much so elicit responses from people, and negative ones at that. So I do have a question on this, on what are your thoughts of things like hypnosis or neuro-linguistic programming when it comes to this point of not being able to really gauge the effect of words on another?
I think in those instances where you can set out to elicit a specific response in your audience is when the audience share a certain type of triggers or framework of language and words. And so it's possible to design your delivery to play on those triggers. But I think that starts to fall away when you start to expand it across different cultures. And it needn't just be Western culture, because you get subcultures within a culture as well. And some people, some cultures communicate in different ways. So there's the cliche of sometimes people sounding aggressive, or some cultures will speak in a very animated fashion, and to someone who isn't a member of that culture, it sounds as if they might be arguing, but that's just how people in that culture communicate. With hypnosis, it's an interesting one, but my understanding of hypnosis is that the person being hypnotized has to be willing to be hypnotized. So if someone doesn't want to be hypnotized and they go into a hypnotherapy session, my understanding is that it would be very difficult to hypnotize that person. So again, I think that is similar to the point I was making, where it really depends on the listener. The listener has to be susceptible and open to it in order for it to be effective. And if they're not, then it won't be.
As human beings, we are affected by what people say, especially if they have authority and they have credentials. But the reason I'm talking about this and thinking about this now is because over the weekend I was thinking a lot about freedom to express yourself, to think, to speak your mind and have it be in the open. And the thing that really was eating at me was, should conversation never make anyone uncomfortable? Should it always be that when people talk, everyone is comfortable? And is that really what achieves change?